This is Jared Ethan Black, Genesis, Episode 2. Who's the king?
My desire is to take this and present it in such a way that you are oriented. Have you ever been disoriented? I mean, just think of the word. Like you're when you're disoriented, you're oriented poorly. You don't know where you are. You're confused. It can be chaotic. But when you get proper orientation, there's something very freeing about that. It's almost like an alignment where you're like, oh, good. I actually see and understand how I'm supposed to walk or where I'm supposed to walk. So the scriptures, these 66 books contained therein, can be, upon first glance, fairly disorienting. I mean, you're talking about many authors, quite a few editors. You're talking about genres, poetry, history, rabbinic remez. You've got genealogy. I mean, the list is actually quite complex as to what makes this thing up. Stories, exaggeration, prophetic oracles from the mouth of God through a human being that ultimately get written down in this little thing. So it stands to reason we should spend some time figuring out how this thing works. So my goal, as a reminder, is if it could so happen this way, we'll take roughly 10 of our times together, and I want to orient you to the beginnings. Genesis. And then we may skip over to Matthew, which is right dead center. It's actually the conclusion or the grand announcement. It is the transition point of all things in what occurs in that Gospel of Matthew. And we may take about 10 times together in that. And then lastly, we might as well put the exclamation point on it and talk about disorienting. We will find our way perusing the gutsy letter to 7 churches in the book or the letter of Revelation. And that'll be long about in spring. And by that time, what I hope will have happened, if we could sew it together such, that the stories from the beginning start to find their way solidifying in the center so that you begin to understand what the goal or the trajectory is of this grand experiment called creation. And in that, I want you to be able to step back and look and see from that whole orienting picture that you fit. You're a part of this. You're not an oops. You're a part of the grand design of the creator of the universe. And your life, little though it may be, my life, little though it may be, is contributing to the grand tapestry ultimately known as the kingdom of God. Welcome. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And as we talked about last time, and the Spirit of God, the Ruach of God, hovered over the surface of the waters. And God said, and there was light. We're introduced to God in these 66 books as light. Light, and then John later says light and life. Let me introduce you to a characteristic of God. Just from these first 4 verses. If you miss this characteristic of God, you could find yourself completely disoriented for the rest of your days. It's subtle, and it actually requires you to do a little bit of digging. I think I've mentioned to you that the rabbis would teach that the scriptures themselves contain 70 layers of meaning. And so it's wholly appropriate to find yourself in a layer of meaning and to begin to dig and trace and skirt your way through to get oriented in that layer of meaning. Oh, but don't be so caught up in the fact that maybe you've actually discovered how it is. because you may drop into another layer of meaning at any given point in your life and discover that you must find your way through that as well. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, that's fairly descriptive. Do you know that this is not the oldest written creation account that exists? This is a creation account through a peculiar Hebraic lens, through a peculiar called out people, but it's not the oldest one written down. There are others that came from the same region. And so it does beg the question, oh, well then what am I reading here? And with what authority does it really come if it's not first? We're people that like first. We like first things. We like things to be primary or a priori. We're always on the search of digging back and seeing, okay, but if I can just find out what was authorized, then I'm good. Well, college professors actually love to do this. They love to disarm and dismantle the heads of students by taking what you naturally might have assumed in a good Christian upbringing and dismantling it. They would argue it's for the purpose of putting it back together in a more proper way, which some, and actually many, have done, and that's great, laudable even. But others enjoy the process of dismantling so that people flail and they become disoriented. Therefore, you can fill your head with any number of things that ultimately line up with nothing. So if this isn't the oldest thing written, with what authority does it come with? Well, let's drop in a layer of meaning, and that's really what I want to do with you today. An older creation story, which would have permeated this region, the Semitic regions, later identified as Canaan, but before that, just this soup of tribal cultures. You actually read, and I think you guys touch on it, the Enuma Elish, Babylonian creation myth. If you don't, you'll find it somewhere along the way. Well, that one, at least its writings tend to be older, seem to be older than anything that we would contain in here, except maybe Job. So what's going on in Genesis? To what audacity does the author of Genesis, who's writing this down, think that they're doing? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the waters. Let me tell you what the creation myth, the Babylonians, that region, was talking about. And then I want to tell you how this fits in. In the Enuma Elish, we're dealing with council of gods. In fact, you got to know that's a worldview. The worldview of the scriptures, the worldview that this enters into, it was assumed that you're dealing with a godly council, a divine council. As you guys study your myths and legends, and that the divine council is it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Like, of course there's a divine council. Well, in that divine council, in this Babylonian creation myth, you've got characters just like you would in any other story. And in these characters, the divine council, for whatever reason, decides that it's time to determine which of the gods is king, ultimate ruler, which of the gods is master. And so the council of the gods calls upon it. It's actually a lesser-known god named Marduk, lesser-known deity named Marduk. And Marduk is called upon to do battle against the goddess Tiamat. Now here's what's interesting. When you start digging back in languages and you find yourself kind of pitted in this one of these 70 layers of meaning, that word Tiamat in the Semitic languages is quite linked with a phrase I mentioned to you last time. Tohu and vohu, this wild and waste used in Genesis, the very beginning, and the earth was tohu and vohu. It was formless and void is an interpretation, but really you can get it's an uncreation. The earth was disintegrated. It was all torn apart. The earth was chaos. Well, Tiamat, that word is tohu and vohu linked. It's linked to the same idea. So Marduk, the lesser-known deity, is called upon this goddess of Tiamat. And Tiamat is understood as that who controls the waters. Now back up a second, because you know this. When you've studied your mythology, he or she who controls the waters has tremendous power. Because on a big green-blue ball, where the blue represents water, and there's quite a bit of it, when water breaks its boundaries, it's terrifying. When water leaps out of the ocean, not just in a crashing wave, but in an unending deluge, it mixes everything. It disintegrates everything. Back in 2010, we had the historic flood of Nashville. I used to have offices up in Nashville right along the Harpeth River, which flooded. It broke its boundaries and it rose incredibly. It went into what they called the 1,000-year floodplain, which I didn't even know there was such a thing, except for the fact that insurance won't pay for it if it's in that floodplain, which is why they called it that. My offices sat in a cul-de-sac, one-story office, 8-foot soffits, and I was in the neighborhood, I watched as the water rose first to the foundation, then to the bottom of the windowsills, then to the top of the windowsills, then touching and licking the soffits of the roof. It was totally underwater. In a few days, the water had receded enough that we could get in there, and I went in there with my dad, and I was in chest-deep water. It smelled like gasoline and sewage. And we pushed open the swollen front door, and the first thing that caught my attention was everything was disordered. Pictures that had been hung in the back office were now floating in the front galley. And I stood there in the water, and I saw we had this little faux mantle, like a fireplace thing against the wall. It was decorative and, nice. It was a lamp on that, and it was, of course, toppled. By this point, the water had receded such that the lamp was over, and the mantle was swollen and broken. And I looked at it, and I remember standing there going, that lamp is on. I'm standing in chest-deep water. The lamp is plugged in at 12 inches. The plug is underwater, and I'm in the water. I remember saying to my dad, do you think we should be in here? So we slowly backed our way out, and thinking this would really do anything, we cut the power to the building. I don't know why we thought that would be any safer, but it felt better to us. But the point was this, it was water outside of its bounds. It truly is powerful. It's beyond powerful. It'll take, the majority of our planet is built in 3 to 6 foot foundations. Water can upset that foundation like that. It'll take houses off their foundation in an instant. We're not nearly as safe and secure as we think we are. If the oceans break their boundaries, when the rivers break their boundaries, it is terrifying. Quick, fun YouTube search, but also will horrify you for the rest of your life. There's footage of the tsunami that occurred in, I want to say Indonesia. It's not Indonesia. Was it Indonesia? I see it on the map. I should have drawn my maps when I was younger. Watch that. You've got people on the beach. There's all sorts of pools, and there's tents, and there's houses, and people are there, and you watch they had no idea. And you watch the moment of terror as the water, now, it doesn't come in a 100-foot wave. The wave is coming up underneath. And the volume of water is such, it comes on the beach, and you see people start to run. And then it comes up to the pools, and it starts moving deck furniture, and it just doesn't stop. You see houses physically move off their foundation. Cars, of course, are just floating rowboats. Everything is just destroyed by the power of this water, and it didn't stop. It went in and in and in and in. The god or goddess who controls the waters is powerful. The Babylonian creationists knew this as well. And so the goddess of water, Tiamat, was all that controlled the ability for chaos, to let chaos reign. That's the picture. So this lesser-known god Marduk is called upon to do battle with Tiamat, and so they do battle. And here's what's fascinating about it. This, of course, predates anything written in here. This is the mindset. This is how worldviews are set. This is how they understood how things happen. So Marduk defeats Tiamat, the goddess of water, the tohu and vohu, the wild and waste. It says that he splits her in half with the breath of his mouth. And he separates her top from bottom, and in the space created, Marduk orders what was once chaos. And the divine council proclaims upon that very action, that was the demarcation. The divine council then exclaims, Marduk is king. Marduk is king of the council. So in the ancient world, what it looked like to be king was he or she that could conquer the chaos, the ever-encroaching stew of disorder, disharmony. That's what it meant to be king. Could it be that our scriptures enter in not just as some randomized, I'm going to write down a story? Could it be that our scriptures, the author of Genesis, was being far more targeted into the culture in which he lived? Could it be that our scriptures, not just answering the character and plot line and the beginnings as they were, could have crafted and said in such a way as to make sure that the first readers, those in that culture that understood their worldview of divine councils and tohu and vohu and Tiamat and the Marduks, could it be that our scriptures here are answering that very question? Not just giving a play-by-play sort of disconnected of, oh yeah, and then this happened. Oh, and then after that, this day, and this happened. Could it be that our scriptures are a direct cultural response to the day in which they were intended? I'd like to submit that because listen to how our scriptures actually unfold. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. The earth is tohu and vohu, Semitically linked to Tiamat. If I am a first reader of this in this culture, I'm picking up the clues. And the Spirit of God, now here's the tricky thing about that word spirit. Ruach in Hebrew is the word spirit, no doubt. But it's equally the word wind. It's equally the word breath. Oh, and we pick it up all through the scriptures. The wind of God, the mighty wind, it was like tongues of fire atop their head rushing in. I mean, we pick it up all over the place. Jesus with his disciples on the end. Strange passage in John. It says that he grabs them by the shoulders and he breathes on them and says, receive the Spirit. There's something linked here. This Ruach of God, the Spirit of God, he puts the breath of life inside mankind. That Spirit of God is very active. In fact, I mentioned to you that real nerdy Hebrew phrase, the tense used of this Spirit, this Ruach, this breath of God hovering over the surface of the water. In Hebrew, it's a constancy. It's the tense of the verb. It's the hitpael case, but it's sitting there, and it means this. The Spirit of God was a buzz over this tohu and vohu, this chaos wasteland. Watch out because I'm orienting you. You're about to see the nature of this God. Chaos is over the surface of the deep, but the Spirit, the Ruach, the breath of God, is flittering, hovering, constantly vibrating above. For what purpose? Well, what was Marduk's purpose? And with the breath of Marduk's mouth, he split Tiamat in half. Well, in our scriptures, it's the breath of God, the Ruach of God that speaks light, and there's light. And when you start reading the story, Genesis 1, Genesis 2, you see that what happens is He separates the waters from above from the waters from below. And in that space creates order. There was this, there was this. It related this way. There was evening and there was morning, day one. There was evening and there was morning, day two. And the seas brought forth life. The grounds brought forth vegetation. The grounds also brought forth animal creatures, the birds in the sky. All of it fitted and fashioned together in what the Hebrews would call tzedakah, which is righteousness, meaning it rightly related to itself. Relationship, proper relationship, was no longer tohu and vohu, disintegrated pieces bumping into each other in the sea of souls. It was this formed, fashioned, created, ordered paradise. If you're in the ancient world and this comes across your tribe, what statement has been made to you when you read these words or you hear these words? Oh, it's not Marduk who's king. It's who we later learn is Yahweh. Why? Because Yahweh, the great Ruach, has created order by splitting chaos in half with the breath of his mouth. Don't ever be disoriented by the fact that there are many story plot lines in progress. Your job is simply to be oriented. As you get oriented to the scriptures, I can attest, but you've also got the host of human history to stand and witness. Those who find themselves being ordered by the words therein discover what the words themselves promise. Peace. Shalom is the way the Hebrew says it. Shalom is more than just the absence of conflict. Peace doesn't just mean, no one's fighting. Good. Peace. Shalom means everything is as it should be. So if you say shalom as a greeting, what you're willing and wishing and projecting and speaking is that your life should be ordered properly. Everything is in its place. It is as it should be. And so when the waves of life, the chaos that naturally wants to break its boundaries and borders, you must know who is king. If you don't know who is king, you will undoubtedly, and why wouldn't you be tossed about by the waves of chaos? I mean, why wouldn't your life be undisciplined, unordered, undirected? Of course it would be. Look around you. Look around at a world who has rejected Yahweh as king. We can't think straight to save our lives. It is an absolute chaotic disaster out there. And these are very smart people. Very smart people. But the tendency to be disordered, outside of the recognition, the acknowledgement that Yahweh, the very Spirit of God, is the only one. God is presented to you in the first 4 verses of this story as the most type A personality you will ever see. What does God do when God sees chaos, disorder? There's a rumor in Christian circles that somehow God is repelled by this, that sinfulness, disorderedness, missing the markness is somehow the disqualifier of all creation for God to participate. That God turns his back, snooty nose in the air, and goes, I just can't handle God's your sin. Wrong story. That story doesn't originate in the beginning. The story that originates in the beginning is God goes, chaos? And the flittering, powerful, teeming, ethereal nature of this God finds God's self over the surface of the deep, the abyss, the chaos, the mess, the squalor, and goes, oh, do you know what I can do with this? Light where it was dark. Life where it was dead. End of story. If you only know that, if but that, you've got true north for the rest of your days. Oh, but there's so much we're going to fill in, so don't worry. It's not just there. There's so much we're going to fill in. Last thought. We advance over into Matthew, which we'll get there again, and we'll probably reference this one more time. But in Matthew 8, you see Jesus in a boat with his disciples, as well as other boats. They're traveling across the great lake there. And as they're going across the lake, it says that the seas kick up in a nasty storm. And apparently that happens quite frequently, specifically on that lake. It's just in a natural geologic bowl, so that the winds become extremely nasty very quick. And that water, I mean, it's a small lake, I mean, in all things considered. I mean, you can imagine just taking something and shaking it. I mean, that's what happens. The waves become epic. And these fishing boats going across the lake over into the land of the Gentiles, they're goners. They know it. These guys, they've been on this lake their entire life. They're not stupid. They're not given to fear, except for, okay, this one's real. The waves are crashing in, the boat is sinking, and somehow they approach Jesus, who is sleeping in the lower deck. And they rouse him and they wake him and say, Master, Rabbi is what they say, don't you care that we're perishing? And bleary-eyed Jesus seems to get up and look around, and I don't know, maybe he's just a little cranky. I don't know. He's just kind of like, where's your faith? And it says that Jesus comes out and he stands on the bow of the boat. Now this is difficult to do because it's already been described. The wind and the waves are epic here. I mean, this is chaos ensuing right in their midst. And it says that Jesus stands out and he says, peace, be still. He probably shouted it. I'll spare you. Peace, shalom. Be still. Stop it. And it says at that very instant, the wind and the waves stopped. Now, I don't think it just went glassy. If you've ever been to a wave pool at any of the parks, you know that when they turn the waves off, it takes a little bit of time, but you can tell it's over. And then eventually it does calm. And that's what happened. At the breath of his mouth, he speaks over the chaotic waters. And it is, in fact, righteousified. Peace, be still. It is as it should be. And they all stand back, and don't miss this, because this is a hidden layer for many people. They stand back and they go, who is this? That even the wind and the waves obey him? Like, it dumbfounds them. Why? Because they know the beginning. Who is it alone that conquers the wind and the waves, the chaotic water? Who is it from the beginning? The King. God is King. Is it Marduk? Well, that's kind of what Genesis comes in to answer. No, don't be confused. It isn't Marduk who's king. It's this Yahweh. And when Jesus steps out with the authority of Yahweh, and it works, they're right to ask the question, who is it that conquers the chaos? Well, we know it is God alone. So who is this man on my boat who has just accomplished the same with the breath of his mouth? It's a huge question. Don't miss it. We've got 28 more times together, give or take. I want you to see him. I want him to step on the bow of the boat of your life. I want him to speak his word over your life. I want you to hear it, I want you to see it, but mostly I want you to feel the effects of it as God, God's self, God alone conquers the chaos that is little old you and little old me. And then watch what he does in this community. Oh, it's power from on high. And you don't have to miss it. So Father, I pray that you would do what only you can do. You take words and you breathe your life, your spirit, your wind into them, and may they infuse us as we go about our day. In Jesus' name, amen.
So many questions in my head, it's like a carousel spinning. Just when I think I'm at the end, I find I'm at the beginning. Well, if I had the chance to ask them, would I even know where to start? Yeah. Would I ask them chronologically right from the creation? Or would I start with the finale, the book of Revelation? Maybe I should stop my thinking, let the questions flow from my